about to begin. We want to welcome you to the Vampire and Devil Show. We want to welcome you to the Vampire and Devil Show. It's gonna be bloody fun. We're gonna kill everyone. Welcome to the Vampire and Devil Show. With lots of blood and lots of guts. Two horror fanatics and rock and roll nuts. Welcome to the Vampire and Devil.
Hey Frankie, have you watched any of that Vampire and Devil podcast show yet?
Alright, ghouls and goblins, we got some fun, unique, and interesting takes because we are in June. We are celebrating Pride Month, like you guys know. So myself and Devil decided to put in our intakes on some really uniquely designed movies that kind of deal with the LGBTQ community and stuff like that. So we kind of put our heads together and we're like, what would be some kind of unique movies to talk about? So yeah, my friend, we decided to discuss May and Hellbent.
Yeah, we were like, well, it's June, starting off June, and myself, the devil, and the vampire are huge allies of the LGBTQ community.
Yep.
And we wanted to, give that genre that's very, very niche genre of horror, queer horror, a little bit of love that it doesn't get nearly as much as it should, because there are some amazing movies that are within that genre, other than your normal ones that everybody knows, like Rocky Horror Picture Show and those ones, which are unmistakably probably one of the best movies out there. Me and Vampire are huge Rocky Horror Picture Show fans. But we wanted to give a little bit of love to, some other movies that maybe you've heard of or you haven't heard of.
Right. And so the interesting about this showdown too is because, both of the movies fit the genre and the category very well. But we have your movie, which we're about to discuss first, which is more of that, like, not as direct. It's a little bit more indirect when it comes to how it ties in with that community versus my movie, which we'll get into after, that is very in your face for that community. So it's just going to be also very interesting to talk a little bit about just filmmaking styles, where you have a movie that's a little bit more subtle, but still right there and clear in plain sight, versus another one which is just right up on Front Street. It is like, no, this is how this movie's designed. This is 100% what this is about. And we're going to ride with it and really shed light on that community. So it's definitely going to be fun conversations, my friend.
No, yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. So let's jump into May.
May? What?
That's from 2002. It's actually directed by Lucky McGee, which I think is hilarious. I feel like that person should have such an amazing just career at making like St. Patrick's Day movies.
Yeah. Yeah, I love a lot of his movies that he's done throughout his career, and he's also got himself into the Masters of Horror collection that was on TV at one time. It had a lot of cool horror directors, and he was lucky enough to be have an episode on that. But yeah, like I said, this movie stars Angela Bettis as May, and I'm a huge fan of her. She's she's on my list of like weird, kooky, odd girls that somewhat draw you in. She's just a cool actress, and it's just a cool movie of her in this movie. It starts off where she's kind of like a loner girl she's got a lazy eye that kind of wanders, and she wears glasses, and she's kind of the girl that that you lives next door, that keeps to herself, and is not doesn't have very many friends, and is kind of experiencing life, looking inside instead of like hanging out and stuff like that, as far as it. And she just kind of like, she fantasizes about things, and she has conversations with a doll and things like that. She's an odd duckling,
Yeah.
but she's harmless, or we think so.
Right. Like for real. I was like, okay, this is kind of an interesting thing because yeah, it starts off, obviously when she's a little kid. Yeah, she's got this lazy eye. She kind of has the surgery and stuff to get it like corrected, where she's kind of like, got the Long John Silver look going for a little bit and stuff like that. But yeah, she just kind of is like one of these, like you would think to be just harmless girls, just kind of living her life. She's kind of socially awkward, she's into guys, so to speak, and wants to get into more of that. She's kind of sheltered because even then, even back when she was a kid, is what kind of brings in a little bit of like the Annabelle syndrome a bit, where like her mom, while not quite, mom from Carrie style protective, is still kind of like, well, it's okay if you're not friends with anybody or whatever. They just don't understand you. It's fine. You know what? Here, let me introduce you to the first friend that I ever had, because, I just started making my own friends, which, well, that's kind of creepy in its own right. But at the same time, like, I get where she's coming from to a certain degree, So yeah, she becomes, she gives her this doll, in like an Annabelle box, honestly. And that is kind of the thing where while she's still, she's doing her thing, she's, working her day job and stuff like that, but has this imaginary friend at home. But it's not 100% one of those like going to work, just kind of futz through work and kind of survive it, and then just go home to have like hours worth of conversations with a doll. No, it's just more like, living your life, trying to get to know this love interest, but just living your day-to-day life. But then also just having that, for lack of a better term, I guess, kind of emotional support at home if you come home sad.
Yeah. It's just like, like you said, she's trying throughout this movie, trying to be more relatable and trying to get more out there. She definitely gets into people's body parts that she likes and gets obsessed to them. you know, Very early on in this movie, like she sees somebody that's standing there and she likes their neck, or, she really finds this guy that she really, really likes and starts to kind of stalk him a little bit. But because of his hands, she really likes his hands. And, eventually just kind of like makes herself kind of bump into him occasionally, oh wow, I can't believe you were here. But then, like I said, she's stalking him. She goes to a diner where he's eating, or a cafe, and he's half asleep, and she weirdly goes over to him while he's sleeping and kind of rubs her face on his hands, which is just like the creepiest thing in the entire world. Like, that would be so weird to wake up and all of a sudden some girl's like rubbing her face on your hands. You're like, okay, what's going on over here, freak?
Yeah, totally. It's definitely that kind of a thing because it deals with that uncertainty. And while I just kind of used the Carrie reference earlier unwittingly, like for the sake of just that comparison, there actually are similarities that I didn't intend with those two characters as well, because people are definitely in the horror community going to be much more familiar with Carrie than they are going to be with May. But it is that same kind of thing, that just very quiet, sheltered, awkward girl who still has the same feelings that like a raging jock or like, uptight cheerleader would have. and she just has weird ways of showing it mixed with, yes, unusual infatuations, just like you said about certain body parts. And while the movies are by no means the same, but just the individual body parts thing just kind of gave me this kind of offshoot of like Frankenhooker vibes.
Yeah. Yeah, the crazy thing about, you're referencing to Carrie and kind of like how she's very kind of like that same homebody kind of feel to her, which is kind of interesting because, eventually later on Angela Bettis does play Carrie in the TV movie version of Carrie.
Yeah.
So it's kind of yeah, so it's kind of like, she was kind of grooming herself for that role with this role, I guess. But yeah, it's such a crazy iconic role. And then you have so you have her, you have the guy love interest that's kind of like your normal typical dude. He's a mechanic or something like that. And he's your typical guy. And then she got her, I guess, quote unquote, sort of best friend, sort of that works with her at the vet, which is played by Anna Faris, who is your typical, overtly over sexual, quote unquote slut in the movie. She's very open about her sexuality, and her sexuality is, whether it's with a woman or with a man, she just loves, she loves being with, whatever she can get with, and she notices like things about May that I don't think she noticed before, because all of a sudden, May had a bad day and was kind of taking a scalpel and cutting herself a little bit on her thumb, maybe a little bit of like, like people who cut themselves, like a cutter or something like that. But she was just kind of doing a little bit of that kind of stuff, and she seen that, and she was like, "Oh, this girl's a freak." She likes freaks because she considers herself like, okay, this is somebody that I can maybe get along with. And then that's when she starts pushing herself and kind of forcing herself onto May. And and May being, like I said, being a loner, being always by herself and only having her doll to really talk to, takes this person's interested in me, and oh my god, and takes it so you know, full heartedly. And then she goes to her house and sees that Anna's character is with anybody. She was like, "Hey, I just wanted to be with this girl," and she's like, "Hey, I can leave her if you want to." But May, in her head, she thought that she was gonna have her by herself and not share her with anybody else.
Right. She kind of gets hit with that like impromptu betrayal and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Because there's this movie has this kind of love triangle meets like love square thing that they have doing, because obviously you've got, May, who's into the mechanic, but then you've got the coworker that's into May, who subsequently May starts getting into, but then you've got honestly just the random girl, which is just like, look, this is just my, this is basically just kind of my F buddy, or just a girl that I just, we're humans and we have needs, and that's just who I call to get down with, and and all that kind of stuff. So there's like all these different kind of intricate angles when it comes to like, specifically how they want this to like be, and like, how is it working? How is it not? Because then, just like you said, you've got the unintentional blood play mixed with like, I guess a little bit of S&M, a little bit of that sadomasochism thing. Because it wasn't kind of intentional, but May kind of shook it off and then got, Anna Faris's character curious, and then she kind of liked it, but then at the same time wasn't as committed as you would say to like May's character, where it's kind of like where you have like a person who's like very committed to like, let's say, fet night, like fetish night at a club, where that is their scene to be a part of. When you take somebody who's like a newbie, doesn't mean they're going to be turned off by it, but they're dipping their toe more into the water as they get more used to it. Where despite the fact that Anna Faris's character was definitely a sexual freak, that was a part of her like personality that definitely hadn't developed, because she was just more of that full on like just sex driven style versus, you know, May is more of that like I need multiple things to kind of like rev up my sensual sides and my desires.
Yeah, yeah. And then, obviously, like I said, she gets rejected. And first thing she does, and I was kind of hoping that Miss Vamp was not watching this movie. She kills the cat.
Yes, she was. So, yeah, Mrs. Vamp didn't like me so much for that one. But it was she kind of knew it was coming. So, because you can kind of tell when you watch the movie, you kind of know it's coming.
Yeah.
So she turned away and stuff. She's like telling me when it's over because she just knew it was coming. But yeah, no, I definitely got a little bit of a raised eyebrow, a side eye look, and a fang exposed.
Yeah.
For about 15 seconds.
Yeah. And then that scene right there pretty much starts this descent into madness. She goes out and sees this random punk rocker guy who was played by I think his name, I can't remember his first name, but his last name is Duvall, but he was in Donnie Darko and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. She finds this guy and brings him to the house. This guy is so awkwardly weird, like he keeps trying to have sex, so he's just sitting there like, man, is it hot in here? I'm gonna take off
So
my
good.
jacket. I'm gonna take off my shirt, and obviously then she sees, ooh, there's a body part that I like of his. I'm gonna kill him and take his body part.
No, for sure. His name's James.
James Duvall.
But James Duvall, who it's funny because honestly, outside of this movie, he's actually got a pretty established catalog. Like he's stayed active over the years, but and it's not like he's got this insanity of just heavy hitters, but the movies he has gotten are definitely quality mixed with like cult status because May has a certain amount of like love when it comes to the horror communities. But the other three movies that are like probably dominantly his main roles are Donnie Darko, like you said, Gone in 60 Seconds, and Independence Day.
Yeah, but he was also a big one that's a big cult following. If you're into weird, crazy movies, is Doom Generation.
I was gonna say you're so gonna bring up Doom Generation.
Yeah, Doom Generation is such a. If you haven't seen that movie, go and check it out. For a movie that came out in its time, is way beyond anything that was coming out at the time. So don't want to spoil it, but go watch that movie. But that's the movie. That and Donnie Darko are always my favorite with him. But, I mean, obviously, like you said, Independence Day is great. But yeah, he doesn't last too long in this movie. He gets about like a 10-minute scene and then gets the axe.
Yeah, but it's also so crazy too, dude, because like he's there playing this overly just stupid character, sex-driven dummy because like you said, he's like, oh, yeah, it's hot in here. Mind if I take off my shirt? And she's just like, yeah, sure, go ahead. And he's got this really awkward, bad-looking mohawk meets like side braids thing going. It's just not good. It's just terrible. But then he's like, oh, well, you know what? It's still hot in here. Cool if maybe I take my pants off kind of a thing. And then he like goes to get a drink and she's trying to stop him from opening up the fridge or the freezer to get ice because her dead cat in the freezer, like wrapped in like plastic wrap. And all of a sudden he's like, what the hell, man? Like, I am not going to be a part of this. I am out of here. Or so he thought.
Yeah. Yep. And then, like I said, then she just, once she starts doing this, she starts figuring out, like, maybe I'm up to something. Obviously, she goes on a little bit of a killing spree. I love her, dressed in her outfit going after Anna Faris. That was probably one of my favorite ones, and walking around. It was Halloween time. She's walking around with this outfit and she's got blood all over her. She's walking around with a cooler that's got blood all over it, and everyone's like, "Oh, cool costume." She's like, "Oh, thanks."
Yeah, cool concept.
Yeah. I like your look. Not realizing that that she's really bringing a dead body around with her. And then gets towards the the climax of the movie, and she's going after the love interest, and eventually there's some fighting between the two of them, and she gets the overhand of him, and takes him apart, and starts making this kind of dead zombie kind of doll that she makes with all the parts of that she likes of these people. If you had, like I said, if you had good legs, like the girl that was sleeping with Anna Faris, she had some pretty legs, and she's like, "I like your legs," and the girl's like, "Thank you," and then now I'm gonna take them.
Yeah. So yeah, it has this yeah, because it really does have this kind of, like I said, Frankenhooker meets kind of Jeffrey Dahmer thing going, because obviously, while people who are familiar with the serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer and his, like, melting of people in like acid and stuff like that, but it's still his affiliation for body parts, not only storing them in fridges but also just having bodies by him to cuddle, is one of the things that kind of stood out to me about May's personality, and her just kind of want to be loved but trying to kind of make the perfect mate.
Yeah, yeah. It's crazy, and then there's like a little bit of an offshoot. She tries to go and work with a bunch of blind kids, and brings in her doll that she's talking about, and like they want to go see it, and they're like no, and then break the glass,
Yeah.
and in crazy fashion, all of a sudden, which that makes no sense to me, why a bunch of blind kids are going to be like, hey, she's free, and start rummaging around all this broken glass, basically walking on them, and crawling on this broken glass, and it's like they look at me like, why did you bring glass to a thing? But I'm like, why do these kids are idiot enough to, if I was a blind kid and I heard some glass breaking, I'm going to be like, I'm not going anywhere.
Right. And it's just kind of weird too, because it also again plays into a little bit of that like security blanket that is the doll, because as May's anger and frustrations build in various ways, the glass would continually crack in
Yeah.
in a way like, almost like, Annabelle's temper is starting to flare up about, like, no,
Yeah.
you're allowed to start getting involved with all these other things or people, because now there won't be any room or time left for me.
Yeah. Which is weird because like you see it as it's cracking, but a lot of that is when you finally see it, you kind of see this, it's got a little bit of a crack in it for real.
Yeah.
But then like as she's going and she's arguing with the doll, and the doll starts cracking more, you see it's super cracked, it's super broken. But then when she takes it to, like I said, takes it to the kids, or you see it in other times, it's not cracked. A lot of that stuff is all in May's head. She's got a form of schizophrenia, or dementia delusions and stuff like that, obviously because she's having these conversations, legitimately conversations with a doll that's obviously not a real doll.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just kind of puts you into her mental state, which basically kind of goes to the end of the movie, where she goes and she finally makes this doll, and she's laying there, and the doll comes alive and puts his hand around her, which a lot of people have kind of taken like, did it really come alive? And I'm like, again, it's like we've talked about with Maniac, it's all just in May's head,
Yeah.
that this doll is, this corpse thing that she made is legitimately alive, just like her doll was alive.
Yeah, and I mean things like, and also the other thing too is that the movie ends right around the way it begins, with the similarities, almost an eye for an eye.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, and as we were discussing this, I mean, obviously, other than the scenes between Anna Faris and her, with this being a considered a queer horror film.
Yeah.
A lot of it, like you said, is very subtle. Lucky McGee has talked about how he wrote this movie kind of in the spirit of his trying to figure out his sexuality with being bisexual.
Yep.
And it's got a lot of that. She likes the main character, which is Guy. She has feelings for Anna's character, but a lot of it's about like how the community feels like there are monsters, or the fact that they have to hide a lot of times. And there's a lot of that repent, that kind of like stuff that's going on with them mentally and emotionally and stuff like that. So a lot of this movie is, it isn't full on straight up queer horror like you would expect or sometimes see. It's more of like, the how the community feels and how they feel they're represented sometimes, and how they feel like I said, they feel like they're loners, that nobody loves them, that that they're monsters and stuff like that a lot of times. Where this movie is very very subtle, but it is considered a top of the queer horror when
It
if
is.
you look into it. And like I said, it's always been a cool movie of mine. I never really got as far as you know I didn't realize it was so much into the to the queer horror community as far as that when I first started watching it. I mean, obviously, other than the the scenes with her and Anna, I was kind of like, oh, really? But then when you look back and you think about the movie as a whole, and like where the characters are going and how the characters, it definitely does play in that genre.
Yeah, it's definitely very like trapped in the closet.
Yeah.
That's always been the the big moniker, of course, in the gay community about freedom coming out of the closet and stuff like that. So this is definitely much more of that kind of a thing, which where we're about to get into the complete opposite end of the spectrum. But before we do that, let's discuss the obituaries, my friend. Let's talk about our kill count. Let's talk about how we rate this movie when it comes to the showdown and overall. So start it off, of course, my friend.
I mean, like I said, this was my first intro into, and most people, I believe it was one of his first movies or first earlier movies of Lucky's. And like I said, I've always been, when I first seen this, I was like, oh, I was drawn to it. I like the whole, I'm kind of weird, I'm kind of spooky, I'm kind of like this kind of feel to it, mixed in with the serial killing kind of realistic, feel to it. And like I said, as I grew on, I love Angela's career and stuff like that. So it's like it's one of those ones that I like to go back. It's a movie that I do periodically watch, at least maybe once a year or so, just because I love the whole imagery of it. I love the how it was shot. I thought all the cast was very well done. And it's one of those kind of movies that's kind of, it's been done before, but not in a way like this, where it's kind of like it's very unique in being sort of a ununique movie. You know what I mean? So for me, like I said, for me, so I've always had high regards for this movie. So for me, I give this movie a 7.5 on my rating.
Cool, man. Absolutely. For me, it's I'm with you on pretty much all of those points. It's a casual movie for me. I have seen it before. I've seen it a couple of times, but very, very sporadically spread out over time. So it was actually a lot of fun for me to get to sit down with this movie and just kind of pay attention, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way to our fellow community, like just like, yeah, I'm watching this movie, but I'm spending most of it on my phone. No, it's just like, it's just nice to be able to sit down and really watch a movie for not only talking points, but to make sure that I understand it properly. And I do think it's great. I think it's incredibly solid. Overall, I think it's a good time. I love the uniqueness of it. While yes, it is a highly regarded queer horror movie, I do like the fact that it's not for the overall populace, because again, there are going to be plenty of people out there, and that's totally cool, who are just turned off by that community, and that's because they don't relate or don't understand, and there's nothing wrong with that. Myself and you know, we happen to be advocates for the community. We do believe in it and we do support it, and that's totally good and acceptable, of course, for that end of the spectrum, for people who are that way. But I do like the fact that while it's there for this movie, it's definitely subtle, so it's still a horror movie for everybody. It really can be. It's got the unsettling nature, like people who maybe can or can't, or just maybe not very well when it comes to like animal torture and stuff like that. But then again, you have those growing up points where it's like, hey, I could relate to that awkward feeling growing up, or I could relate to my mom or parents being this way, all the way up to shit, it kind of sucks not being super, wanted by my love interest, or I don't really know if I sway this direction, but I like this person as a friend, ultimately leading to just kind of the psychiatric shattering of May's overall character. But overall, I think it's really good. I think it's really enjoyable. For me, it's a 7 when it comes to this movie, because I do think it's a solidly above average movie that's a lot of fun and stuff like that. And again, us, we don't do quarters and we don't do 3/4, so we do have a way to swing. Let me start with you. What do you think about why we should rock it out a 7.5 or lower it to a 7, man? Fire away.
I mean, like I said, I think again, when we talk about originality, it is a very original movie based off of stuff that has been in other movies, but it's got such a unique spin to what you said, like the Frankenhooker, Frankenstein kind of aspect to it, but on a realm, or on in a film that we hadn't seen before. Yeah. The fact that it blew Angela's career up. You have Anna Faris, who's huge, and and it. You have Duvall, and I mean, like I said, to me, like I said, and it's one of those, like I said, it's one of those movies that you can watch, and you can watch it over and over again, periodically, without feeling that it's you've watched it too many times. Because some movies you can just feel like, I think I've seen that movie too many times, and there's other movies that you can just pop in all the time and just watch. It's like I said, to me, I always felt like this is one of those movies like that you can watch, and every time you watch it, you can find different little things that you love more and more about it.
Sure. No, honestly, man, I'm cool with that. I really am. We'll pop it a quarter point, and we'll make it a 7.5. I'm cool with that because I do like the cast. I do like the unique spin, and I do like the fact that, yes, overall, I would say it's a movie that people can enjoy more often than not, and or at least watch, more often and stuff like that. Yeah. And we'll get into the details for, of course, our next movie shortly. But I will say, though, I don't feel that same way about the next movie when it comes to, like, how casually would it be on your constant watch list. And yeah. I don't feel that way about the next movie. But again, we'll get into more details on that. So it's all good. But that's the way it's going to be, Fangs. We're going to rock this movie. We're going to rock May at a 7.5 on the obituaries. And now, as we move into our next movie, this one is very high up on the LGBTQ, consideration of a gay movie. It is very much a gay movie. It is full, it is put out there everywhere, from the way it's described, even the way it's written as the synopsis on the back of the DVD case. It's just full on up there, no shame, 0 F's given, which is all good. And that was actually one of the reasons why I chose this movie, is that when you and I were having this discussion, that movie didn't hit me right away. But when it hit my brain, it hit me like a brick. I was like, no, we have to talk about this movie. So I am straight up choosing this movie, because there are so many movies that we've discussed before, or just movies that are just out there with similar scenes, like a Black Swan, for example, which is a movie we both enjoy. But this movie is very much in your face when it comes to that, which is one of the reasons why I was like, you know what? This needs to be a talking movie for this particular episode, because it's so on the other side of the spectrum and very, very from top to bottom. So this movie takes place completely around the gay community, specifically the male gay community. It takes place almost entirely in a gay club, based around these men who are basically being taken out one by one by like, you know, a bear, like a male big dominant killer who wears a mask that actually gives me a little bit of Black Phone vibes to it, but just kind of on the other side of the spectrum when it comes to that. But overall, I think it's a very cool movie. I think it's a cool concept. The director is 100% very much a part of that community, and the ideas are very much there. But it's a very traditional slasher movie. I can't really pretend like there's a lot of subtle nuances to the story. It's basically a very classic Freddy or Jason like group of people being stalked by a killer with other casualties mixed in.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, yeah, going into this movie, I haven't seen this movie before. So, you know, looking into it, researching in it, yeah, it's just full on, straight up, right in your face. This is about as 100% obvious that it's a queer horror movie straight from the beginning. I mean, like I said, this movie doesn't pull any punches whatsoever as far as where it lies in its sexuality. You know, I mean, it's straight up from the very beginning, man. It's so crazy, but in a good way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a lot of I've talked to a lot of people and have heard comments about this. It's them finally being represented in a movie that is a slasher killer movie that can be one they can consider themselves their own movie now. Finally, you know, it's crazy to think that. I mean, there are fewer movies that have been out, but this is one of the first movies that I can think of that just predominantly just has a lot of, LGBTQ, community, a lot of queer horror and stuff like that into this movie. From, like you said, from the director, from the music that's in the movie are all predominantly gay artists, to a lot of the actors, the producers, everybody on this film. It was, it's like, to me, it kind of reminds me of like a sort of like, black cinema when they started, when you get a lot of those movies where it was predominantly a, black director and a black grip and a black producer and black actors and stuff like that. And they started feeling like their voices can be heard in the cinema world. And this is what this kind of movie is to me. Now, granted, like you were talking about, it is a, everyday kind of cliche serial killer slasher movie, but and it's not going to win any awards for great writing and great acting as far as it, but you know what I mean, like I said, but I mean, it's just it is a huge step and a huge part of the of queer horror.
Yeah. No, it definitely is. And that's also something I also really liked about it. Personally, I thought the soundtrack was actually pretty bitchin'. Like I really like the soundtrack quite a bit because honestly, as members of the industrial community like we are, there's actually a lot of, LGBTQ representation in industrial music, whether even if it's not the main person there, whether there's always some type of band member or usually something that ties in some way with that community. You can see it in Ministry. You can see it in My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult. You can see it in a lot of these bands, and like I said, some have members that are very much just out there and it. And then other bands where it's a little bit more subtle, but that they're comfortable with that kind of lifestyle. But I love the music of the movie. I thought it was absolutely great, pretty much from top to bottom. But I also did really love the subtle nuances of the movie on certain, like, snide or petty things, like the fact that obviously it is not a secret that community is not highly loved when it comes to like religion and stuff like that, because they, most people feel that, marriage is between a man and a woman. You know, people have stern thoughts on, trans life and stuff like that. And are you really a member of this or are you not? A lot of different ways to break it down. But I do love the stance in certain ways of the fact that this nightclub, that's the dominant main killing site for this movie, is actually in a church. So there's a very strong to certain amount of fuck you that I really loved about the fact that they did that in a queer horror movie.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the crazy. That's like you were saying. That's the thing about this movie. They don't shy away from it at all. I mean, it's just like you would be in any kind of 80s. Kind of reminded me of a lot of the 80s slasher films, but on that other side where you're seeing, instead of the woman being exploited, it's a lot of these men, and they're just going full on the whole entire movie. Like there's no pulling punches. They're using a lot of crude humor and dick jokes and things like that. Where I just love it because, like I said, if this movie, if you're offended by anything like this kind of community stuff and things like that, it's definitely a movie within the first 5 minutes you're going to be like, nope, and click off, which is perfectly fine. I mean, if that's something that you're not into. But like I said, you shouldn't like I said, in any kind of movie, you should be able to enjoy representation of seeing yourself on the screen, and that goes for this community as well, where it's just I just love the fact that it's just like they don't give a fuck. I mean, there's just like, yeah, we're just going straight forward for everything that we can do, and we're gonna, yes, some of the stuff is very cliche, and some of the even some of the queer jokes and stuff like that are very cliche of like how people feel stereotypically gay men do this or gay men do that. I mean, it's a lot of it, even in this movie where the guy is dressing up, he's a model, he's a gay man and he's dressing up as a woman in this movie, and he's just like the whole entire time, like he feels like he's not scoring with the dudes as much as he thought he was going to be because of the fact that he is dressed in a drag. And then there's a lot of that community that you know you know make fun, or not make really make fun of, but kind of have a lot of hatred and love between it. It's crazy, just from having friends of mine in the circle, how some people in the gay community don't like trans people. Some people in the gay community don't like cross dressers or people who do like, drag performers and stuff like that. And it's so crazy because to me, I thought, here, you're such a small, considered a smaller community that you wouldn't be so hatred and about love, but a lot of it is. And they talk a little bit about this, but like I said, with him being in drag and stuff like that, and even a lot of the other actors in the movie saying stuff to him and doing stuff. It's like, yeah, to me, I always found that kind of fascinating, sort of, where it's like, yeah, even within a community where it's all about inclusive, there still is a little bit of that taboo and things that certain people, even that are part of the community, don't like within the community itself too. It's interesting, and like I said, they touch a little bit on that in the movie.
Yeah, they definitely do, because like the initial kills are there like right off the bat. I mean, within
Yeah.
the first 3 minutes, you get a brutally awesome beheading and like multiple kills very quickly. But yeah, you've got the really good looking model guy that you literally think would be like, no pun intended, but beating off guys left and right. But the fact of the matter is, he doesn't feel like he's getting that respect. And not only is that being touched on throughout the movie, his demise was kind of based around that as well, because he's basically trying to pick up the killer, who's even standing there holding his weapon and basically ignoring him, because like, look, dude, whatever, I am not interested. If that's your thing, that is just not for me. And he's basically begging for him. He's like, no, give me a chance. Like, I want to hit on you, or I want to have a night with you, or whatever. Look, I really am a man. And he takes off his wig, he takes down his dress, you know, he exposes whatever it is he needs to expose, which does stop the killer and bring him back to see that, yes, he is this way. But then in one swipe, dude doesn't have a head, and it is a wrap on that guy. So it is very crazy with that, because like you touched on, you know, there is a lot of that crazy kind of gay on gay crime where you would think that it would be much more inclusive. But then, like we touched on before with other things, there is a certain amount of, you can't sit with us, that is very prominent and very out there and clear, when it should be a part of the community that you think would be overall more inclusive and stuff like that. So it's definitely tricky on that. But there's also some other like crazy scenes in this movie that are not only just crazy for how close they are, but also crazy for what they lead to. Like, you have the main character who talks about how he no longer, you know, he can't drive, and he could no longer be, you know, this guy that he was, because he can't see well out of his eye, and doesn't really say much more about that. Then he has a run-in with the killer, who comes at him, who basically uses like a sickle kind of knife, who goes in for the stab, and literally it turns out he's got a glass eye. So whatever issue, whatever incident it was that took away his previous life, it took his eye out completely. So he literally has a glass eye, which stops the blade from impaling him through his eye. And then later, as he's being threatened by the killer actually pops his like eye out with his mouth. So there's this crazy homoerotic, you know, taunt eroticism that is based off him only knowing that because he tried to kill the guy and this foreign object stopped it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's like, and it's like, you know, going back into another scene before that where this guy, one of their friends, like is infatuated with this one dude, and it goes to the bathroom, and he's like, hey man, like just make sure, you know, they got this, you know, this killer's out there, like just make sure, you know, you stay here, and I'm gonna go to the bathroom or whatever. The dude's like, yeah man, I got you. Like 2 seconds later, some hot dude walks by, and he's like, oh, whatever, I'm gonna go off to this guy. I'm like, well, what a good friend. And then, like, you know, then all of a sudden, you know, he's cleaning off blood, and he ends up getting mangled and killed by the killer. But I just thought that was funny, because it was just like, it's like, thanks a lot, dude, man. Like, you were supposed to have my back, and now I just got killed like 2 seconds after you decide to. And that was the crazy thing about it too, is like, just like, you know, just like any other slasher movies, the fact that this guy could be in so many different places at so many different times, and you go, what the hell? But then again, that was, you know, true for almost every 80s slasher. It was like, wait, how did he get here and there all of a sudden? You know what I mean? But yeah, I thought the slasher, the killer in this movie looked cool. He was big and menacing, and that, like you said, that mask is very, you know, it is very, very cool and kind of crazy, kind of like, you know,
Almost
kind of,
half devilish, like something that's definitely up your alley, my man.
yeah. I thought it was cool, and like, you know, you don't get too many, other than like being killed by like, you know, Jason in the countryside. You don't get too many sickle deaths
Yeah.
in horror movies. So I thought that was cool, like, you know, him going around killing these guys. And like I said, I mean, I don't think that you could probably wipe someone's head off in one swipe, but that dude was big enough. I kind of believe that he could probably swipe someone's head off in one swing.
Yeah, I mean, I believe it does. In my opinion, it does make sense that it can be done, because, for example, samurai swords have always been well known to be able to go through things, often multiple things, with one shot, especially with the particular hand motion. And so it is one of those things where, like, look, if you have a blade sharp enough, but also this guy clearly was very strong and very good physical shape. So I don't look at that too much. Where under a normal circumstances of like an everyday kind of guy, being like, that's not that believable that he could just take something off clean like that. I think it is actually very believable in this particular instance when it comes to that. And as we get towards like the end of the movie, like there's continuity issues that because this movie is also shot very low budget. It definitely has a little bit of that like, you know, film student feel to it. There's issues with like, well, the blood that was here is now suddenly gone. Like who the hell would one even clean it up mixed with how would it even get cleaned up that fast is just impossible. So there's different issues with that. But as we get to the end of the movie, the only real overall gripe I have with the movie is honestly the end of the movie for me is incredibly anticlimactic. Yeah. Like it's the big chase scene with the killer chasing down the final survivor kind of thing, just to have the killer literally taken out by like one well-placed bullet shot. And I'm just like, I am sorry, peeps, but for a movie that taking the certain nuances out of it and we're simply looking at it as a slasher horror movie, I'm like, that was way too easy and so anticlimactic. So to be honest, as much as I enjoy the movie, and I'll get into the details shortly, is the fact that the kill of the killer was very anticlimactic for me and seemed just way too easy.
It was kind of odd because like, you know, here's the guy, he's, you know, being stalked by this killer the whole entire time, and like I said, like you mentioned, he gets his eyeball sucked out, and you know, then all of a sudden he's like handcuffed or something like that, and he's hanging by one hand, and you know, he's got a gun in his hand, and you know, obviously his, you know, his good eye is still in his eye because obviously he don't have the bad eye, so he can kind of go. But yeah, it's like shoots him right into that mask. It was kind of cool looking, you know, that the bullet hole hitting him in the head, hitting the mask. But yeah, it was like very anticlimactic, like you said. Then it's like at the end, you figure the bullet hit him and killed him, but then he's in the ambulance and you see his mouth open with the eyeball in it, and you're like, okay, did the killer survive or not? And but yet they've never, you know, it ends right there, so you don't know. And you know, as far as we know as of right now, they've never made a sequel, so maybe you know, Hellbent 2 is possible, but you know, I don't see that coming out anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't really see it either. And we've discussed this with previous stuff as well. I'm down for a sequel personally.
Oh yeah, that'd be cool.
And I would check it out for curiosity. I would check it out for continuity, and I would just check it out for casual enjoyment, man. So I think we're both in agreement that hey, if it does happen, definitely down for the cause as far as checking it out.
Yeah.
So when it comes to like the obituary and it comes with like the ranking of this, for me it's very traditional slasher. I can't go super high up on it. I like the movie a lot, and I'm a big fan of the concept. I love the fact it went there, and frankly, I love the fact that it's just on Front Street. Like there is just no question about the community that they want to know about this movie and put out there for people to understand more and know, yes, this happens. These raves, these clubs, these dances, these things are a thing, you know, and you know, murder doesn't have a gender or a sexuality. So I love that about the movie. As far as kind of the rough, you know, film project shooting, I like it because I love the little grittiness that it does give this movie. But again, I can't really score it tons of extra points because it does take a little bit away from just the visual of the movie. But I love the fact that it's a unique movie. I love the fact that the concept is right out there and that nobody's really kind of dared to go there. But I can't go super over the top because, again, it's very simple and normal as far as the slasher style. While I do like the killer, it's still a very normal presentation. And, again, I did find the ending to be kind of a bummer. I didn't think it was all that because it was just kind of like, shit, really? That one shot from a guy who can barely see? But it is what it is. But also, like I touched with before, it's not a movie that I can also see being very high up on people's lists of something that they would constantly or even often pull off their shelf to watch. So for me, it's a 6.5 on Hellbent.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I agree with you on all those points. Like in general, I would probably score this movie, pretty low. Not super low. Obviously, it's not Rotten Tail low. But it's just because it's a your typical slasher movie. The acting is horrible. The script is kind of nah. The writing is eh. The ending is very anticlimactic. The killer is kind of cool looking. I do like the killer look. I like the fact that, and then like I said, the bonus points for me is the fact that it's such a, it takes a huge amount of, balls to say, to put out a movie that is predominantly in a community that he's not shying away from whatsoever. Where, some movies at that time who kind of doing it, they're kind of shying into it. There's a little bit of that taste of, the queer horror, the gayness and stuff like that here and there in these movies, where this is just like, yeah, this movie is like, like going to a Pride Festival. It's Pride Festival in a horror movie where they're not afraid to let everybody know that happens to be whatever city their festival's doing, this parade's going, that that they're who they are, and that's what this movie is. It's very well outspoken. This is us. This is who I am. This is what I am, and this is you're gonna watch it or you're gonna turn it off, and if you turn it off, I don't give a fuck because I'm gonna make it anyway. So like I said, I give huge credit for, for that part of it. But like I said, as far as like you were saying, as a movie, is it something that I'm gonna watch over and over again? No. Even, I mean, I can't say, I can't speak for anybody in the community, but
Yeah.
I feel like people in the community will mention this movie and show somebody who hasn't seen it. But in my opinion, even somebody in the community isn't going to be watching this movie over and over again, like more like the Rocky Horror Picture Shows and stuff like that, which they will, like, hey, if you want to learn about the kind of movies that I like within my community, here, watch this movie, or watch this movie, or watch that one. I mean, not saying that they won't mention this movie, because if you find out you're somebody in your community is into horror movies, and you're like, hey man, have you seen this? And someone's like, oh no, I haven't seen that. So it's definitely going to be on people's lips, but it's not something like, have you seen this? Yeah. Okay, do you want to watch it again? Most people aren't going to be like, okay, you've seen it. Okay, cool. They're not gonna. It's not like, that's gonna be on their, on their DVD player as, as often as some other movies. But yeah, overall, like I said, it's fun. It's not meant to be taken seriously as far as the killing and slashing side of it. That's the cool thing about the horror community a lot of times, and with these movies, it's like, especially with slasher movies, is like it's supposed to be, you know low budget and corny, and you're supposed to be like, what the hell just happened? And I like that there's a lot of that in this movie, where you're like, man, that was crazy. I can't believe they just did that shit, or I can't
Totally.
believe they did this, or said this, or did that. So yeah, I mean, but again, like I said, if it in general, I would probably give it a low score. But I'm actually, I agree with you, with the 6.5 is a pretty good rating for this movie. Like I said, with the bonus points for, like I said, having the guts and the balls to make a movie where, they're not afraid to show, what, who and what they are.
Absolutely, 100%. So there you have it, ghouls and goblins. There you go, our fangs. Fatality to Hellbent. In the showdown, we've got May. We have against Hellbent. It is victory for the devil. For May at a 7.5 over Vampires Hellbent at 6.5. And that's the way it's going to be. But we appreciate you guys as always. So victory to the devil. May gets the win. Horns up, bangs out.
Stop. It's the devil here again with another self-indulgence movie review. This time I just got done watching The Devil's Carnival. Come on in to The Devil's Carnival. Have you seen this yet? It's such a great movie. I love it. Horror, death, suicide, murder, whole bunch of cool stuff with a lot of cool music in it. Oh yeah, our Terrence and Darren Bousman back at it again like they did in Repo the Genetic Opera. But this time they're bringing you down to my level, to the Devil's Carnival. And oh, I've never looked so good before. Anyway, you should go and check it out.
Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to the Vampire and Devil Show. You never know who you're gonna see, or what you're gonna see. I hope you have a good time.
Ghouls and goblins, spooks and creeps, what's up? I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you guys are being incredibly sinful. Devil loves to be sinful. And we're going to talk about a little bit of sinning as we talk about Father's Day. We're going to talk a little bit about what makes a good father, or maybe what makes the best father. So we are coming at you with another Vampire versus Devil showdown where we are pitting a little bit of the Lord against a little bit of Hidden Away, as we pit The People Under the Stairs from Wes Craven against Bill Paxton's directorial debut of Frailty.
Yeah, it was like, we're thinking what sinful, evil fathers could we talk about? Because, some fathers are good and some fathers are not very good, and some fathers like touching. Oh, never mind, that's another story, but whatever. But anyway, so we decided, we just do a little Father's Day special, and it's kind of a unique special. Like we said, we have two movies that very vast difference in how the movie partakes the father. We got one movie where evil father can be evil, maybe, or maybe he's doing the Lord's work. And then you have another guy in the movie, The People Under the Stairs, where he's a daddy, he's a father, he's a S&M freak, but maybe he's not really even a father, because he's not even really a father, really, particularly, he's not really the daddy. But anyway, like I said, there's a lot of movies that portray evil dads, and like we've done in our Mother's Day special, we got to give love to the evil dads. So that's why we decided, let's do these two movies and talk about some bad daddies.
Exactly, and it's also kind of one of those things where in typical Vampire and Devil fashion, we don't want to go super obvious when it comes to this type of stuff. Yeah, it's easy to pick The Shining, or it's easy to pick Father's Day from like the segment from Creep Show or things like that. Yeah, that's easy. And you know what easy is? Easy is boring. So we decided to go this direction. So why don't we kick it off a little bit with the late, great Wes Craven. In fact, this is actually a double feature of late greats.
Yeah.
But we'll start it off with the late, great Wes Craven with The People Under the Stairs.
Yes.
Which actually is funny because it actually stars Brandon Adams, who I grew up with seeing in so many movies, like the first two Mighty Ducks, The Sandlot, like all that kind of stuff. So it was actually kind of funny watching that movie and just getting reacquainted with it, because it's always been a favorite of mine. And realizing like, oh man, the Fool is actually being played by somebody who I've seen in like multiple movies and all around that time. Because this movie came out, I believe, in like around like 1988, I think. And then The Mighty Ducks is like, and The Sandlot are early 90s movies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's just a really, really interesting movie where it's kind of based around this family, breaking into homes to rob them, and then they break into the wrong home.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's a great Wes Craven movie. He always does, the old school Craven movies are always been awesome. And is a spoiler alert for all you goons and fiends out here. We will actually be doing a Wes Craven episode here soon for our directors episode, which we'll talk about a little bit about this movie, but we're just going to talk a lot about it, just the movies that in general that Craven has done.
Yep.
That have been like a huge inspiration for Vampire and myself. But yeah, it's such a cool, like you were talking about, the Fool, seeing him and stuff. Even the sister, the sister was in summer school. I love her in summer school. There's so many people that are in that movie Summer School that when you watch back, that like Shawnee Smith is in it, and now who is in the Saw movies and stuff like that. So it's like you watch some of the stuff now and you're like, oh shit, yeah, they were in this '80s like camp, funny movie. But anyway, back to the people under the stairs.
Yes.
Yeah. It's such a weird. It's like a movie that we've talked about before. It's a lot about the side of good, the side of evil, the side of rich, the side of poor. It's a very ingrained racial movie as well. You know what I mean? It's talking about like these two white business owners that are basically buying houses and populations and stuff like that in the ghetto, and basically kind of making them so that these houses get kind of drawn down and worn down and beat down, and basically making these people pay rent that's huge versus like what they should be paying in that area. And it kind of these guys were like, yeah, hey man, we got to do what we got to do. And they're like, hey, we heard that this house got a shit ton of money and these gold coins. Let's break into it. And like when they get into the house, they see it's kind of crazy fortress. You got this crazy mother that's opening the door that doesn't want to let the fool in with the Boy Scout because he's got to pee. And she's you can definitely, I mean, throughout the movie, there are a lot, for people who are out there who do get offended. There are a lot of racial slurs in this movie, but I mean, it just portrays for how evil and how manipulative and how racial they are and what they're doing is that. So I mean, it's done in the taste like that, how it's kind of furthers along the story.
Yeah, 100%, because it is that kind of design. It's like the quote unquote rich white family, or like the man keeping the minorities down and stuff, where you've got these people who are living in this just average, to a certain degree even below average home, but paying an above average price, and they're just like, well, we're going to get ours, like we're not going to stand for this. But it also speaks to Wes Craven as well, and his willingness to push the envelope, where a lot of people will look at Wes Craven in general as just kind of that average slasher director until you get to know his body of work, where you might look casually at the Screams and Freddy, and even to a certain degree Shocker, and just be like, okay, this is a typical slasher director. But the fact of the matter is, this is one of the earliest accounts of a, black cast being put in the forefront. Very much like what Jordan Peele does now. And you and I have already discussed movies like Candyman, the most recent Candyman. So it's very cool seeing, revisiting a movie that really was ahead of the curve when it came to racial tensions. And the funny thing is like in a genre which, of course, is very white dominant, minorities dying first is always the stereotype. It's always kind of the way things have been. But having this movie, put a minority family and minority actors and actresses in the forefront as the stars to begin. And that is even a few years before even the Rodney King situation even happened, which put so much more focus on racial divide and racial tension. So it's really worth, giving a little bit of credit where credit is due to Wes to thinking outside the box, being so open-minded and realizing the value that, there is no color in the actors and actresses of what you're casting in the big picture when it comes to can they do the job and are they right for your film?
Oh yeah, exactly. And then, like you said, you get into this house, you see this, quote unquote mother and father that you think they are, and later on we'll talk about what they really are. But I love it, that they're just like completely insane, like the things that they do in this movie. And like I said, shout out to I can't remember the actor's name that played the dad, but I loved him. He was in Silver Bullet. He was the
Oh yeah, Everett McGill.
yeah. He was the main villain in Shine or Silver Bullet, and he just plays such an evil character. Him and the mother just play this evil card just so good in this movie. But yeah, like I said, they're trying to break in. The three of them break into the house. Then all of a sudden, the one kind of goes away. The other one, they can't figure out what's going on. They think maybe that he stole the loot. Then you find out that that he'd been eaten and died when the dog chokes up his ring on his finger. Was pretty cool. Like, then eventually, you see stuff. You hear like this thing going around. You hear like somebody in the walls are going, "Woo!" and crazy shit. You're like, what the hell is going on? You see like a daughter that's in her room. She's making these weird dolls and stuff like that. It's such a weird concept of like the family life of this this house, what I mean? Because you would think, okay, maybe they're just, rich eccentric assholes, but then you find out that they're a lot more sinister than what you would think to begin with. Like I said, with the windows being barred and stuff like that, maybe it's because they're living in what would be quote unquote a ghetto area, so they're kind of like afraid of like the minorities. And then again, it's like, if you were that super afraid of minorities, why would you be living in that area to begin with? You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, you got this. I mean, I guess it's that quote where the rich stay rich because they count every dime as much as they can. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, it's such a crazy, cool concept of like the whole premise of this story is it's like, the what concepts is evil. These guys are evil in multiple facets of evil.
Yeah. And it's crazy too because like not only, it's one thing to like run a household a certain way. It's one thing to like, be landlords or whatever in a certain way, which they are. But at the same time, you've got like what they do, as secretive as it is, that's a little bit more put out there on like Front Street. But then as you're watching, there's this over the top, like just BDSM sadomasochism side where man is walking around and running around in this like just latex bondage suit, which is definitely not something that's going to be on anyone's bingo card as far as like the secret life of, as they would say. And it's like so like crazy as like the overly secretive, staring through peepholes, like eyeballing everybody up and down, like, oh, I see that they're wearing this type of jewelry, they're wearing this ring and stuff like that. And so you already can tell that there's a crazy over the top kind of lunacy to these people in general, just on what they believe to be casual attire. And then we haven't even gotten into the people under the stairs yet.
Yeah.
That this is just, you just look at these people as, God, these are just some fucked up crazy people. They're just into just beating and bondage and anger and rage and whatever you want to look or associate with that, lifestyle. And then you come to find out that it's not just that. They've got like, for lack of a better term, like zombies that they're keeping hidden away in the crevices, under the stairs, in secret rooms as they break free.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, you find out, like I said, the whole, you believe that these two are mother and father, and this little girl is their daughter. And then you come to find out that they're actually brother and sister, and these are people that they've stolen their kids from like the neighborhoods and communities. And these boys that are people under the stairs were all boys that they try to make, because they wanted a son and a daughter. And they one of them did like the cardinal rule they talk about it, with the three, speak no evil, hear no evil, that saying.
See
So
no evil.
yeah, see no evil. So yeah, so these boys were always, there was something that they did, like, these guys were all looked like they were all teenage boys, 15, 16. So of course some of them probably tried to get a little naughty. Some of them said stuff, so they cut off tongues, they cut off, so you see these guys are all mangled and bangled. They've been in a basement for how many years, so they're all white and kind of pigmented. They are very zombie like looking, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's really cool. And then like I said, you heard the Sean Whalen playing Roach. He was
Yep.
one that got away from the initial basement that they had them all herded, and got into the walls, and they couldn't get to him, and he was just kind of antagonizing them. And he was probably like my favorite part of this whole entire movie, which I met Sean Whalen, the actor. He's such an awesome guy. He's like probably one of the coolest actors you can meet, because he's just so down to earth. He has this little thing when he travels, he calls them plane buddies. And like he'll just go, and he's wherever he's sitting down, you're sitting next to him, you're his plane buddy, and he'll take a picture with you and talk about you on his Facebook or Instagram. Like, he's just a super cool guy. But yeah, his character Roach is like my favorite part of this movie, because he's just like antagonizing this dad constantly so much, and just making him pissed off, and just doing a bunch of stuff. And you find out like I said, you find out he's one of the boys, and he got his tongue cut off.
Yeah, and Sean's also just been in so much just great fun stuff as well. I mean, let alone the well-known stuff like People Under Stairs and Twister, but he's a regular in Rob Zombie's movies, and he was in one of my favorite, like, lesser spoken about movies that I think deserve more love in Laid to Rest, the Chrome Skull movies. But he's just been in so many, like, fun projects. But I've seen that too, where he just loves people. And he's just like, I just like to meet people.
Yeah, he's super cool. We were at a convention with him, and he was doing karaoke, and it's nothing better than him seeing Roach from People Under the Stairs doing Jesse's Girl.
Yes, I can imagine.
It was awesome. Like, he's just a fun, cool guy. But like I said, this character is so awesome. And then, like I said, you're going through all the stuff. The craziness of this is, like, the story is these guys are trying to come in and break in. They notice that the people that are under the stairs are guarding what would be like a safe, and it has all that treasure that they were talking about, gold coins, tons of money, all the money that they basically have squandered from the ghetto. And made this place worse and worse, as all that money has been kind of drawn into them, and they're just keeping it for themselves. And that's the crazy part of the story, is like, the whole premise is you get in, now you're trying to get out. Eventually Fool does get out.
Yep.
And then, like, matter of 30 seconds later, he's like, shit, I'm gonna go break back in, because he wants to help the girl. And I'm like, dude, you spent these people are trying to kill you, and you're getting out, you finally get out. Most people aren't gonna go right back in again.
Right. And I mean, and it's crazy because, obviously the premise of the movie leads to the demise of man and woman. But then the way Fool has it set up has things rigged to explode as a way to be like, don't mess with me because I'll do it. And it's that funny back and forth banter, whereas you look at it now it's a little laughable to people of our age. You know, you got to keep in mind, you and I have been around for hundreds of years, and we've seen a lot of things. But of course, even over hundreds of years, times change. But you look at something back then where you're like, don't test me, man. I'll do it. I'm going to do it. And you kind of look at it and you're kind of like, oh my God, that's so campy. It's so bizarre. But at the same time, it is still a realistic thing where that is stuff that people still do deal with in real life, where you have those situations where your reaction is, look, don't fuck with me, man. If you don't think I'll go there, test me. I'll go there. And man, in a big way, did Fool go there.
Yeah, you were just like the banter. So that was a cool thing about this movie. It's I wouldn't go as far as saying it's a horror comedy, but it has a lot of comedy in this. Like when they were talking about, you know, where Vin Rhames' character in this, and they're breaking in, they're trying to find their friend, and their friend that was breaking in when there was a white guy, and he was like, "Are you sure he's dead?" And he was like, "You thought that sucker was white before? You should see him now." You know, there was like those little cool, little like banter, crazy little like things. You know, punch the dog and and stuff like that. It's like, like I said, it was you know, it's a horrific movie with a lot of stuff, but it did have that comedy side. But like I said, but it wasn't in the vein of like Shaun of the Dead and those where it's strictly just comedy. It's just those like all of a sudden out of nowhere kind of a comedy punch all of a sudden, like the dog going after him, and the only way to get out of it was because he knows the door was electrocuted, was to kind of grab onto it and grab onto his dude, and then the dog's biting him, so it electrocutes all of them, and you hear the dog go and even in, like I said, and and then we'll talk about that too, because we've talked about this on in segments before with Miss Vamp before. There's a scene where an animal does get killed.
Yeah.
In this movie, he thinks he got Fool in the wall, and he shoves his bayonet into the wall, and here's and unfortunately it was the dog. The dog got it on this one.
Yep. Miss Vamp was not present in the room for that. So I watched that movie on my own time. But, and then as we move towards the obituaries and where we decide to rank our kills, right before we get that, we talk about, talk a little bit about the final ending, which is, again, when you test a guy who turns out to not be afraid of you, who's like, fine, if you're going to test me, I'm going to do it, where some people are all talk, fools not talk, and we end the movie in a insane explosion of money.
Yeah, it's just like this money everywhere, just blowing. It just reminds me of like a bunch of movies that have done that kind of stuff. Like that. I mean, like when Batman Returns, when he's throwing the money, when the Joker started throwing the money all around and everybody's going after it. It's kind of like one of those things. And then while this house is blowing up, all these deranged freaks that have been in the basement are coming out and kind of getting out in the light. I love that, where it has the intricacies of that too. Like you have all these people gathering their money and getting all this money, and then you also have all these people who have been victims in this basement kind of escaping out throughout it. So yeah, it's kind of one of those things where it was like right before they blew it up, they were trying to go in, and they're like, these women was like, no, and then like I said, right before the man and woman both demise, you see that the community wasn't taking shit anymore. No. And she was like, oh, I'll shoot every one of you, blah blah blah, and calling them all these kind of names, and they're like, well, what are you going to do with all of us? And, she sees that there are hundreds of them on the street that are all, part of this community that have, they've been taken advantage of. And the woman's like, oh, shit.
Right.
Yeah, we're fucked now.
And it is kind of funny, too, because there is this little part of me that's like, well, man, now you've got all these kind of physically deranged people back out in everyday society. But they are leaving with at least pockets full of cash. So there's this small part of me that's like, well, depending on how much they get, it might not necessarily matter whether or not they can or can't fit in with the general populace of society, because at least they can look out for each other, look out for themselves.
It's kind of crazy too, because it's like you were saying, they're breaking out, and throughout this whole entire movie, you see that they've been feeding on the dead bodies of people coming trying to get into this house, or whatever like that. So these guys are cannibals. So they're just roaming around the neighborhood. I mean, it would have been kind of funny. I mean, I guess it takes away. It would have been funny if one of them would have like went after somebody and like started eating them or something like that. But then again, it shows you that these guys that were people under the stairs were really not the bad guys, even though they were portrayed kind of as bad guys, because they're, you see them eating and what like that. They were just people trying to survive. And, even when they were helping out Fool, like they were all trying to help him out. They weren't trying to kill him. Maybe to begin with, they were kind of like, ooh, food. But then they're like, maybe this guy can help us out and get us all out. But it's kind of crazy. It's kind of a crazy ending. And then we always talk about it on our, before we get to the obituaries too, we always talk about, the possibility of sequels. And we know this movie was done, I do believe it was 1991 was when this movie came out, but it was around that late 80s, early 90s when this movie came out. So it's been multiple years since then. But would you want to see a sequel?
I would like to see a sequel, yes, but more on just a casual curiosity. Am I really jonesing for one? Not particularly. And also with Wes not being with us, it's not even about the fact he wouldn't be able to direct, but it's more about the fact that his thumbprint wouldn't even be on it. And I feel like that's at least a small vital necessity where, okay, if they decide to maybe go with this hot new director, even maybe somebody like a Jordan Peele, since Wes kind of put it out there and deserves the recognition for this, Jordan's taking it to a whole new level with that way. So Jordan possibly could be a good candidate to do a People Under the Stairs too. Or a remake or something. But without the ability to have Wes in there as perhaps at least an executive producer, I'd be down for the potential. I'd be down for the discussion, but I'll be honest with you, Devil, I don't really want it.
Yeah. I mean, there have been rumors around the mill that that Jordan Peele was possibly attached to maybe doing a remake of this. I mean, whether or not that's true or not, like I said, I don't know, but he might not be directing it. Maybe he'll just have a little touch into it, kind of like he did with Candyman, where his name was associated with it, but not actually directing it, himself. But yeah, I mean, as far as a sequel, I mean, what can you really do? I mean, this is the two main bad people are already out, unless you make a sequel of like what happened to the People Under the Stairs. A remake, like I said, I'm not always gung ho for remakes. I mean, it can be done all right. Does it need to be done? No, not really. I mean, if it's done right, it'd be cool. But like I said, it's not anything that anybody in Hollywood really needs to run out and do right now. It's like we don't. I mean, there are enough other stories that you can write that are very similar to it, as far as like the persecution and the driving of like trying to make these people move out of a section and trying to make these people poorer and stuff like that. So you can always make a movie that's got somewhat of a similar feel to it, but not necessarily a remake. I mean, but yeah, I mean, like I said, if it's done right, maybe. But like I said, it's not anything I don't think personally needs to get done as far as like remake. I mean, there's movies I wouldn't mind seeing remade, and there's movies that I'm like, don't really need to touch them.
Yeah, no, definitely with you on that. So let's talk a little bit about the kill ratings and how we want to put this on the obituaries. I mean, for me, it's actually incredibly simple. Like, I love Wes's idea I love the pushing of the boundaries. I love the multiracial cast. And I like the overall general concept. I mean, the idea of like creatures in walls isn't necessarily new, but I really liked the idea of like people's children just being plucked from obscurity and locked away for almost no real purpose other than to lock away a child, which is what I always found to be so weird and unique and interesting and kind of sick about this movie. Is you've got what you think is like this husband wife slash boyfriend girlfriend, turns out to be nothing more than like a whacked out brother and sister, which almost kind of can't help. You kind of almost can't help but go with like at least crossing your brain of some potential incest vibes and stuff like that, especially with the S&M look. But I loved where Wes's head was at. I do think it caters more to specific audiences. I think there are certain horror fans that would look at it and be a little bit more probably a little bit more the millennial type style of horror fans with the stuff they're putting out now, especially with the amount of CGI stuff that's involved, versus this movie, which definitely has a much more of that like Tom Savini feel to it when it comes to proper special effects. But anyway, I love the story. I love the way it's designed. I don't think it's an over-the-top amazing movie like some of the other ones we've discussed that are just ahead of the times or just so out there that makes them great. But I definitely think it's a quality movie. For me, it's a 7.5.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I agree. I agree on all those too. You know, it's one of those movies like, yeah, it's it's a fun movie. It's a movie that, I mean, and I always put that as a bonus. Is it a movie that I can watch multiple times? And I've watched this movie many times, and there's things that you see that you didn't see before, or hear something and like, wait, did he say that? And you're like, oh crap, that even adds a little bit extra more into it. You know what I mean? Because you have that, like you were talking about with the S&M and the sister. I mean, he's got the girl, his supposedly daughter upstairs locked up, and he's kind of going and seeing her and touching his crotch, and the mom's like, you got to come down and rub lotion on my leg or some shit or whatever. And so it's got that like tension where like, is he molesting the girl? Possibly. Are the two brothers and sisters doing stuff, extracurricular activities? More than likely. But so it adds that perversion. But yeah, it's one of those movies. Like I said, I love it. Like I said, I mean, to me, honestly, Fool and Roach basically make this whole entire movie. If you didn't have those two actors, or at least those two roles in this movie, I don't think it would have been as good. I love that comedy, but not trying to make it too over comedy. So I definitely agree with you. 7.5 is a good rating for me on this one too.
Cool, man. I'm definitely down for that. So that's how it's going to be, Fiends. That's how it's going to be, Ghouls and Goblins. We are locking it in. 7.5 for Wes Craven's The People Under the Stairs. Now, as we continue on, we are going to continue on with another late great, and that is the late great Bill Paxton. Not only did he star in this movie, he also directed this movie, his directorial debut. Strangely enough, the first of only 2 movies he even directed, despite the fact he's always had an amazing acting career. And I do think there's a little thing, too, where we're going to break into this. But the one thing about Frailty is it's definitely very out there.
Frailty.
And I do feel that Frailty is the kind of movie that an actor would direct because it's so out there, because it's risky, that even if it's a flop, he really doesn't risk losing his career because he's such a talented, excellent actor that it's like, okay, maybe this guy just doesn't have the directing chops. But he's an amazing actor, so the scripts keep coming to him as, for him to continue to make a career. But we're going to kick it right over to you because, again, this is Devil's Pick. So, yes, we are now speaking about 2001's Frailty.
Yeah. So, yeah. Some people would think, why would the devil choose a movie that's very godly? But you know, it's got a little bit of both. It's got demons and it's got God in it, and it's just a cool. It's just a cool concept. I'm a huge fan of Bill Paxton. I've always been. He's probably one of my favorite actors that does from anything. You know, he can be in serious roles. He's been in comedies. He's been in horror movies. You know, he's just one of those guys that you can pretty much put him in any movie and he's just gonna steal the show. You know what I mean? Like most of the movies that he's in, he may not even be a main character, but he's got all the iconic lines. You know, Aliens. You know, he's
Yep.
awesome in Aliens. He's Near Dark. He's kind of a secondary character in Near Dark, but yet it's got almost all the cool lines. Finger licking good.
Yeah, I was
You
gonna
know,
say, I think it's safe to say what my favorite Bill Paxton movies
yeah,
is.
yeah. So yeah, so it's like, you know, he's just one of those, and like I said, this is you know exactly what a Bill Paxton movie would be. It's a crazy concept, you know. It's about a man with two boys. He's growing these two young kids, and you know he's just an average, everyday Joe Schmo working. You know, kids going to school and all that, and one day he has a dream that an angel came down to him, and that there are demons in the world and that he's going to be given tools and lists about who should be killed, and it's just a cool concept where like, you know, is this guy mentally insane or is he truly doing God's work? And you know, throughout the whole entire movie, even as a viewer, you're kind of questioning. You know, you go to begin with, and you're like, okay, this guy's crazy. Then you're like, okay, maybe he isn't crazy. Maybe it legitimately is this thing is going. Then you go back to, oh shit, maybe it's crazy again. Then you're like, okay, maybe it's not. It's such a cool. It makes you kind of go all around this huge adventure, and it's crazy. It starts off with with one of the boys growing up, and it's Matthew McConaughey, or however you say his name. All right, all right, all right.
All right.
You know, he doesn't like the left side. He's all right.
Yeah, exactly. It's just about living, man.
Yeah, man.
L-I-V-I-E.
And he's one of those other two. They say you put both of those, even though like, you know, Bill Paxton's character is the father of these two boys, and then you know Matthew is the one of the boy grown up. You know, it's just cool to have two actors that are in this movie in general that are just two huge iconic actors with Bill and with Matt.
Yeah, no, you're definitely about that. You're right about all that. It's the thing that I find so interesting. So the thing about Frailty is I saw Frailty long time ago and remember being like, the fuck? The thing about Frailty, and I think it's not only a genius way of doing about it, but I also think it's a little detrimental to the movie, is it's shown kind of through like a series of like secondary visions, which can be a very tricky way of following a story, but is genius in the big picture. The idea of this guy with these kids killing people that he believes to be demons, kind of in the name of the Lord, and asking his son to be there and help him kill these people who his son sees simply as humans, is an incredibly out there concept.
Yeah.
You know, if there's, it's like tell me how to scar a child without telling me you're going to scar a child.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I'm just going to bring him into the shed as I slaughter a mofo, but I want you present for it.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
'Cause it's crazy throughout the whole entire movie. Yeah, you have that where it's like, yeah, it's these two boys watching their father bring home these people that are just random people that you know look like humans, and you know he was told that when he touches them he sees them as they truly are, and in the movie you see that impact does when Bill Paxton's character touches somebody. You can see that he's mortally shocked and not like that, but we don't see it as as viewers of this movie, we just see Bill Paxton's character grabbing these people and seeing stuff. So we're kind of imagining it sort of like the kids, like are the people really demons or is he just killing? And that's just something that's such so far out that it's like, yeah, scarring kids watching, it's like having a, like Ted Bundy or like Jeffrey Dahmer have a kid and like bring them along with your with your crazy madness in this. And it's like,
Bring your child to work day.
yeah. But he, like I said, even in the scope of things, not knowing, not getting into what happens later on in the movie, just as what you're seeing as right then and there. Yeah, it's like, you're as a kid, yeah, you're watching this dude, your father figure brutally kill these people, and then you have to help them bury them into the garden. And it's like, what kind of damage would that do to a kid?
No, absolutely. And it's also kind of crazy too, because like we speak regularly about these cool movies with unique casts. The thing I also love about this movie and Frailty, is how often do you get to off somebody who's like kind of a legend in their own horror catalog,
Yeah.
and taking somebody out from Silence of the Lambs and Brain Dead as the first kill of the movie.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, bro, that's rad.
Oh yeah. It's just like, yeah, it's just, and then, like I said, you get further along into this movie, and you kind of see stuff. Like I said, the Matthew McConaughey's character is going to this police officer, and he's telling him like, hey, I know who the God Hands killer is. And he's telling him the story, and like you said, it bounces back between stories of when he was a kid and what his father did and stuff like that. And then you kind of find out later on, all this craziness and stuff like that. And eventually, you get the two boys, and you have the younger son who truly believes his father, but then but you kind of feel like, does he really truly believe his father, or is it just one of those ones where I just want to believe because he makes a fake list at one time and says, hey, God came to me and told me we need to kill these people, and he was like, wait, didn't one of these kids bully you? And he was like, yeah. And he's like, hey man, we're not doing this for our own amusement. And
Yeah.
the one boy is like, well, yeah, you're killing humans. And he's like, no, we're not. And he puts manual labor into him and makes him dig this hole, and it almost kills him because it was just like, draws them out so much. And it's like all this hatred you have where it's like the two brothers, it's so opposites of each other, kind of Cain and Abel kind of feel to it, where it's like one son will do anything for his father, and the other son's like, the older son is like kind of like the rebelling of what his father is, and then eventually kills his own father
Yeah.
because he was got tired of what his father was subjecting him to.
Yeah, that's really just kind of one of the craziest things about the movie is the story arc and just kind of the way that it's done. And I always just found that to be very, very interesting. Because the other thing I actually always found very cool about the plot of the movie and just the way it's designed is I always felt it was kind of the horror genre's answer to the Boondock Saints.
Yeah.
Which came out about a year before, and it was just kind of that idea of like, because they talk about that, frankly, in both Boondock Saints movies, where, their friends or colleagues at the time are kind of challenging on them, where they're like, oh no, well, are you just kind of doing this to get your rocks off? Like, oh no, that's your new thing, right? And they're like, no, we're not killing people for the sake of killing people. Like, we're going after bad people. We're going after drug dealers and rapists and like terrible people. That's what we do. And that's the thing, bringing it back to Frailty, that I thought was very cool. It was almost this just kind of like, because again, the Boondock Saints is a very religious movie. Because that was the whole reason that the Saints became the Saints, was they got spoken to by God the way they saw it. So anyway, when it came to Frailty, it was that kind of thing, like taking out demons, ridding the world, regardless though of who you would kind of scar in your wake. And that's what I found to be so twisted. Is it's one thing for a person to take on this responsibility themselves. Be like, you know what? I am God's messenger. I am God's or keeper. I am God's destroyer. Like whatever he says I do, I am ridding the world of evil. And I shall be the one to do this. Yeah, look, that's all well and cool if you take that on yourself and that's just the life that you live. But again, the idea that it's almost kind of wrapped around fucking, like I said before, bring your kid to work day is really twisted and sick even in its own right. Because again, you're dealing with a child's mind that now has to comprehend what they're seeing. Is it right? Is it wrong? And the child even tries to get the police involved at one point, and the police are like, that can't be a thing.
Yeah. Yeah, which ultimately, like what I said, that's what brings the demise. Is the son brings the father. That one of the things that they were told was don't tell anybody about any of this kind of stuff like that, or something bad's gonna happen. And obviously, this police officer starts seeing things and starts noticing things. Bill Paxton's character has to kill him, and now he's to Bill's demise. He's like, hey, you just made me kill a person. I've never killed a person in my entire life. And the little boy's like, yeah, you do. You kill people all the time. We watched you kill people all the time. And he's like, but those are demons. You made me kill a regular person. And that's when it comes. Yeah, that's when it comes down where it's like, yeah, he's like, he truly believes that, what he's doing is that. And that's what it gets into, like, into the chunk towards the end of this movie when you start figuring out things and stuff like that, where it's like, okay, yeah, the dad gets killed, and then you find out, later on, that the son killed it, and you got Matthew McConaughey's character, who in the movie is supposed to be the older brother. He said that that's who he is. He's the older of the two brothers, and that the younger brother is the God's hands killer, who's going around and killing all these people and just killing all these people in general. And you later find out that, throughout this whole entire story, which kind of was like weird, like, how would we not notice it? Because, the blonde hair and the darker hair and him growing up, you find out later on that Matthew McConaughey's character is actually the younger brother. Yeah. And the older brother was the one who was going around killing everybody, who was, in fact, supposedly a demon, was told. Bill Paxton's character was even told from an angel that his son was going to kill him, and that his son was a demon, eventually going to be a demon, and he didn't want to believe it, which came to Bill Paxton's demise. And then that's when this whole story kind of ravels up and goes in, and then you kind of see where everything kind of comes in the full picture, where the little boy, who now is Matthew McConaughey's character, Lily truly did see what was happening. Every time he brought somebody home and Bill Paxton's character grabbed them, the dad grabbed them, he saw them and saw them. What it was these guys weren't, these people that they were killing weren't demons in the sense of like, demon, with devil horns and stuff like that. They were just really, really bad, evil people who have done really, really horrible stuff. The one guy was like child molesting and killing little kids, and and all that kind of stuff like that. So they're kind of like rigging the world of all this stuff, and you're like, you find out, all this was true. It's just a crazy twist to it, because you find out that the cop that he's talking to, he obviously killed his own mother, and that's where he was, and that he's doing this list, and like I said, I love that part of it, where it's like, God's gonna protect them, and that's what's crazy. Yeah, everybody you find out all this crazy stuff happens, and all that stuff all goes on, and then all of a sudden, they're trying to go back and try to remember, like, I remember talking to this guy, but I don't remember his face. And they try to go back and look at VHS, the security cameras, and it's all blurry, and it's got his face off. And even at the end of the movie, where the cop goes to this town to kind of go into it, and he goes right up to Matthew McConaughey's character, and he kind of resembles him a little bit, but he doesn't remember him. And it goes where yeah, this whole entire time you were thinking that maybe the dad was crazy. They were legitimately killing people who were they were told to kill. God was put them as his weapon of choice to rid the world of evil doers like myself. I would have not fared well on Bill Paxton's list.
No, absolutely. But I mean, overall, it's a cool one, man. It's definitely
Yeah.
unique and it's definitely a lot of fun. So as we make our way to, again, our beloved obituaries and talk about how we rank this on our kill count, by all means, man, start us off.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's one of those movies where I'm gonna give it bonus points because one, I love Bill Paxton, and the fact that was his director debut. It's such an awesome movie. I mean, I've used a lot of references of God Hands Killers and music that I've done before throughout my life. So I've definitely been hugely affected by this movie, and I put it as like one of my favorite movies from a actor who's first directed a movie. That's up there on my list. Yeah, I mean it definitely is a slow type of movie. It definitely has that M Shyamalan Lama feel to it, where it's got a little bit of twist ending to it. Yeah, it's definitely not a movie that's heavy because, like I said, it's like a lot of like kind of child abuse throughout the movie with him, like with him, basically subjecting his kids to like these people getting killed and the hard manual labor and all that kind of stuff. It's definitely not a movie that you can per se is like something you're gonna watch all the time. Where like, with these two movies against each other, with the People Under the Stairs and Frailty, even though I think Frailty, as far as a movie, is a better movie because it's such a unique movie. It's such a well scripted and well acted movie. It's not a movie that you're gonna watch as much as People Under the Stairs, because People Under the Stairs is more of a fun kind of movie. Well, this is like it is kind of dark and kind of twisted and plays into the roles of like dementia or traumatic stuff and stuff like that, where you don't know whether or not things are really what it is. So yeah, for me it's like I said, I mean, I love this movie. A lot of people probably might not like it as much. It's one of those ones that, yeah, people probably see this as like, yeah, kind of, I don't know, artsy maybe, or kind of to an extent. But yeah, I mean, I've always liked it. So for me, I'm going to give it a 7.5.
Right on, man. Absolutely. So my thing about it, I'm kind of right in that area with you. Is again, shout out to the late great Bill Paxton. I mean, he's absolutely amazing. Like you just heard. I mean, Devil, you're a big Bill Paxton guy. And again, he's been in what is easily one of my top 3, probably top 2 vampire movies of all time. In fact, we even use one of his lines, because we talked about what a great one-liner actor he is, as one of our taglines from Near Dark in We Keep Odd Hours. So shout out to Bill Paxton and just his amazing just character work. But I pretty much agree with everything that you said in that, where, again, I think it's an amazingly unique spin of a horror movie, its own unique horror version of previous movies with their own unique design and style. I think it was genius and even a little brilliant for Bill to take on a project like this, because I do think a movie like this would steer away a lot of people. And I can't say that I know whether or not people had passed on this movie as directing options, which is very possible that it's happened, because that happens all the time. So we don't know if this hit Bill first, his desk first, and he was like, fuck yeah, it's mine, or what. But again, that it is that slow burn. It definitely goes off in a lot of directions, and also the way that it's stylistically designed is that this thought process, that thought process, seeing it from this angle, mental blocks, mental thoughts, all that kind of stuff. It's all that same kind of thing. Very unique, very great. But again, like you had mentioned, the pain of it is a little bit of the slow burn, although I don't think that the slow burn of this movie, for me, is on a level of other movies that I've been a little harsh on in the past for that slow burn. But again, that's a little something to go with it. But I do think, like you had just said, and something we've discussed before, it's not a movie that it's been in my collection for many, many years, but it's not a movie that really sits on my frontal lobe or is a movie that hits me very often as a movie to pull out and watch. And in the in the style of a showdown, in the style of a debate, I think that is something that's worth keeping in mind. So for me, I'm right in your line of vision, but for me, it is a 7. That's how I see it. And again, like all of our fangs know, we don't do 0.25s and we don't do 0.75s. Where do you think we should swing it? I personally think it should stay at the 7 myself, just because of the casual horror fan maybe being a little uneasy or potentially turned off by the unique design of this movie, which is not Bill's fault. If anything, I think he deserves the credit for it. But when I look at our fangs versus what I think the casual horror fan is into, I think a 7 is where it should be. But the floor is yours, my friend.
Oh yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. I mean, I know we go with, a lot of times when we're going up and down and we're trying to figure out who, when we get these tight races, like who we gonna go for as far as like, which movie one we want to give the slash, which one we want to give the thumbs up to, and it's kind of like this one's kind of like choosing a favorite child almost, because it's two directors that are huge people in our lives, with Bill Paxton and with Wes Craven. And
Yeah.
we are definitely going to give that Wes Craven love to him later on. But I do feel like, yeah, this in the realm of this movie versus People on the Stairs, I mean, I would definitely give People Under the Stairs just that little bit of an edge, only because like you said, it's a movie that you can watch a lot more. It's a lot more of an enjoyable film, if not saying that in a mean spirited way, because I love Frailty and it's a great movie, but it's not like an enjoyable movie. It's one of those ones like we've talked about with Antichrist. I love Antichrist, but it's not a movie that you can watch constantly over and over and over again. It's
Yeah.
it's a and like I said, as far as originality, yeah, Frailty is definitely a more of original story
100.
versus that. But like I said, I mean, to me, I would feel like, yeah, I feel like we should give Frailty a 7 and give People on the Stairs the 1, just because I feel like, yeah, just because of the being able to watch a movie multiple times versus maybe a casual once in a blue moon.
No, I'm definitely down for that, man. So if you're cool with that, that's how we're gonna call it, and we are gonna lock it in on the obituaries, a 7 for Frailty. We're gonna make this a final. We're gonna make this 7.5 for the People Under the Stairs. 7 for Frailty, which means fatality to Frailty, victory to the vampire. The People Under the Stairs gets the win for Father's Day. But we got so much more coming up for you, Fangs. We love you guys, and there's so much more fun, debates, infernos, and bloodshed coming your way. Horns up. Fangs out.
What's up? It's the devil here again with another quick movie review. Just got done watching the 2024 Festival of the Dead by the Soska Sisters. It was a pretty cool little bit of continuation of the original George Romero Night of the Living Dead, where they have a festival celebrating the real events of that movie happening. There's some cool Easter eggs in it. Some Soska Sister posters in the movie, even a little quick appearance by the sisters at the party. Anyway, it was a cool zombie movie. It's worth checking it out. You can watch it free on Tubi. Ha ha! Go check it out.
Alright there, Fangs. I'm coming at you with a fresh coffin nails. In fact, I'm going to call this one my vintage coffin nails. I normally come at you with Dracula and vampire movies of the last, 4 years. This one's from 15 years ago, but I stumbled across it, and it looked kind of fun and kooky and goofy. So I decided to watch it, see if I had anything to say about it, and I got a little bit to say about it, so we're going to get into it. 2009's Transylvania. It's the Hillenbrand Brothers movie. If you're into Dracula Dead and loving it, and you like that kind of comedy, vampire stuff that has that old feel to it, costumes, characters, stuff like that, you'll get a kick out of this. If you're into American Pie, you're going to love this movie because it's that American Pie, National Lampoon kind of style in the comedy. You've got 3 basic stories to this, but it's not an anthology. It's just kind of the way they're all spliced together. You've got the main group, which is a bunch of college kids that are going to study abroad in Transylvania. That's the gist of the crew that this movie's based around. You've got the main vampire villain, Ragu, who's trying to bring back his deceased lover, whose soul is trapped in a music box. And in typical fashion, her soul gets out and possesses one of the blonde bimbos of the crew. Nobody saw that one coming, right? And then you've got basically a pint-sized scientist who's trying to bring back his dead daughter by harvesting body parts, kind of Frankenhooker meets Frankenstein style. So that's kind of fun too and kind of kooky. But look, like I said, if you're into a laugh riot, you like dramedies, you like, rom-coms, stuff like that, you're going to enjoy it. The characters are fun. You've got the marijuana-obsessed guy. You've got the slutty girls. You've got the suave wannabe guy. You've got the guy who's into sex. The guy who's into sex is actually kind of fun because he's the character named Rusty, who's basically a descendant of the Ragu Dracula character. And picture Steve Stifler if he had the sense of Jim from American Pie. At one point he's even trying to have online sex with his girlfriend. The adults walk in, he slams the laptop shut, and of course he slams it right on a valuable member of the male anatomy. But that's just the way it is. And you know what? It's the way these movies are kind of based around. But look, it's a fun time. It's a laugh ride. I like to laugh. Laughing is fun. And look, it's not going to win any awards. Look, this movie is a 6 at best because I'm into that kind of stuff. I love the old Dracula feel. The blood is where it needs to be. And it's just like I said, it's a laugh ride and it's fun. I'll knock it up half a point. But that's the way it's going to be. I'm going to slam the coffin door shut. Transylvania from 2009, the Hillenbrand Brothers. It's going to be a 6.5 on coffin nails. Horns up, fangs out.
Another month approaches. This time we honor those who have passed away in the month of June. We honor these 3. Clarence Williams III from Tales from the Hood. Anton Yelchin, who was in Star Trek and also Green Room. And also we honor Christopher Lee, who was one of the greatest vampires ever with the Hammer films. We honor these 3, lost but never forgotten.